Dogman. 8. Our catered ribs. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Like a lot of us, I've been thinking about how much better life used to be when we still had our basic human rights. For one thing, my family always used to throw the best Super Bowl parties. They got bigger and bigger each year until they got unceremoniously ended, not by the Great Reset, but by the Dogman. My father began a Super Bowl tradition that my brother and I inherited, just as we inherited his small to medium-sized business. Remember small to medium-sized businesses? Me neither. But back in those innocent, naive days when freedom of association was still legal, throwing a memorable party was good for business. I mean a real in-person party, not something on Zoom or whatever. We spent more money on the bash each year, but the resultant goodwill and additional business that the party drummed up made it seem more than worth it. Until 2019, that is. Super Bowl Day 2019 was the day when Dogman's presence significantly threw off our business model. For the first time, my brother backed off and let me run things my own way with 2 assistants. The 3 of us did a cost-benefit analysis of doing the Super Bowl party at my family's home as we had before. We had additional expenses the prior year when one of our partygoers destroyed some of the neighbor's property. 2 things we quickly realized we had to do this year was cap attendance and choose a location that our guests could go ahead and destroy if they wanted to. Since the cabin we were renting and bussing everyone out to was surrounded by acres of forest in 3 out of 4 directions, we hoped that would allow our friends and associates to go hog wild in a more affordable way. What we hadn't foreseen, though, was that we would be driving everyone straight into the heart of Dogman country. That's not to imply that we'd have chosen a different location if we had known about the Dogman beforehand. After all, I was not a country boy. I was raised in Pittsburgh, where I was told that werewolves and Bigfoot don't exist, at least not as long as you lay off the moonshine. If I had known that day that we were driving straight into alleged Dogman territory, I think I'd have used it as a selling point to add an edge of the spooky Halloween vibe to our winter getaway. It definitely would not have been a deterrent. Right now there's a dispute concerning who owns the land in question here, so I only want to say that this happened in the neighborhood of the famous home called Falling Water, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. By in the neighborhood, I mean within driving distance. Our cabin and land was located somewhat in the midway of a huge swath of mostly natural land between Uniontown to the west and Myersdale to the east. We were only a 90-minute drive out of Pittsburgh, but we may as well have been in our own country. If I were a large, hairy predator, I could do worse than to live in that neck of the woods. Of course, there are multiple state game lands in that area, so I would probably want to relocate during hunting season. With that one caveat, I'd say that much of the rest of the time, it would seem to be something of a paradise for big meat-eating monster men such as Dogman. In retrospect, it seems logical that we would have had an experience like that located where we were. At the time, though, nothing about any of this seemed logical in the slightest way. So as it turned out, the men bringing the ribs were a little late, and they also were late for their next delivery as well. Rather than bringing the food into the house, they left it on the back porch and sent me a text saying it was delivered, along with an attached photo of our ribs, piled in large rectangular aluminum tins with paper tops on our dark back porch. We had a lot of guys there, and they all liked ribs. Some ordered double orders of pork ribs, while others wanted those giant beef ribs, large enough for Fred Flintstone to eat. I was spending a lot of money per person for that meat, and there it was getting cold on the back porch because I stupidly hadn't been listening for the catering truck to arrive. Running to the back with one of my assistants, I made what I thought was a joke about how we needed to get there before the neighborhood scavengers did. I had pictured raccoons in my mind when I said that, but it was quite another vision that greeted us when I opened that back door on that cold evening out in the snowy hills. There, just a few feet in front of us, were two large, feral-looking, wolf-like dogs, tearing into the tins of ribs and ripping into that food. Each of them was more frantic than the other, to the point where they were both standing up on their hind legs and using their front paws to guide more and more meat toward their ravenous, snapping jaws. Their eye level was quite surprisingly a bit above my own in that moment, and I froze in utter shock. The two great hounds were snarling and growling as though devouring that meat were both the single most important moment of their lives and the single most delicious. One of them was dark gray, and the other had a coat of fur even darker than that. The fur was like that of border collies, longer and shaggier on the main part of the torso, but shorter on the face and extremities. The fur was shaggiest just behind the wolf-like ears and above the shoulders, giving them both the appearance of having a mane of hair, almost like that of male African lions. But these were not felines. These were canines, and they were going berserker in that way that only canines really can. Their eyes were opened wider than wide, giving them the look of almost being in shock. Shock over what? I suppose shock over the chance to be competing over junk food on this level. If the tastiest meal you ever had was raw deer meat, you'd probably enjoy the hell out of some hot barbecue too. Now, one thing I neglected to mention was the sheer size and ferocity of these two mongrels. They were flying over and under and around each other, spilling meat and barbecue sauce all over the porch, then licking, biting, and otherwise inhaling that food into their bellies, as though competing in a speed-eating contest. My assistant screamed behind me, which caused me to scream in turn and slam the door. I never felt so scared in all my life. I was shaking all over. However, almost instantly, I remembered how much money those two dogs were eating away, and anger replaced fear in my basic operating system. I opened the door, shouting like Mel Gibson in the movie Braveheart, to attempt to scare them off. Please don't think I was being brave. I was actually just really upset about those two dogs flushing so much of my money down the drain. By the time I got that door opened, though, the two dogs were carrying away most of the rest of the food, and they were trotting to the woods on their hind legs, using their front arms to carry the food in. I thought I was seeing things, but when my assistant confirmed that he was seeing the same thing I was seeing, a chill went through my body. That was the first moment I realized we weren't just being hassled by a couple of large dogs. Those were some kind of upright walking dogmen. Once that part sunk in, I understood that I was now going to become one of those people who tells and retells the same story for the rest of his life. I immediately felt regret that I hadn't been paying better attention. That was when I had my one great insight about cryptid encounters. At least, I think it's a great insight. Almost all cryptid encounters begin as inconveniences. When we're hit with inconveniences in life, we generally try to speed through them or swerve around them. They are, by definition, annoyances, so we are already generally trying to look past them even as they are happening. When the situation slips from two annoying dogs eating my expensive ribs into two upright walking Pennsylvania dogmen, each over 6 feet tall, running away bipedally with tins of catered ribs tucked under each arm, then it graduates from act of nature to act of the supernatural. All of a sudden you focus all of your attention on it. Maybe it's that sudden shift in conscious focus that brings about the Alice in Wonderland effect that so many people experiencing strange phenomena report. As the big wolves ran away like men with all those ribs bleeding barbecue sauce in the snow, I remember thinking aloud, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. I know I said it out loud because my assistant said something to the effect of, Dude, Kansas could never be as weird as Pennsylvania. We were only able to salvage 3 tins of ribs, but the guests refused to touch any of them. Somebody had Googled Dogman and found out that they are alleged to be bad to eat. Since I wasn't serving Dogman ribs, I didn't see what that had to do with anything. Seeing as nobody else wanted the ribs, one of my assistants and I ate them, which of course set off a different argument. We had more important things to talk about in that moment than any perceived slights, though. We had a genuine mythical cryptid tribe in the vicinity, and now they knew we had food in this warm house on a cold winter night. It seemed likely to me that these upright walking wolves might come back around looking for seconds, but nobody wanted to hear what I was trying to say. I tried to involve them in my thinking about it, but they were already too far gone, so I was going to have to handle things by myself, essentially. I told my 2 assistants to keep people watching the TV or going to the restroom, but not looking out the windows. In fact, we drew the curtains shut on as many of them as we could, and I assigned myself to be on patrol around the exterior of the house. It was a lot more serious out there than even I had expected. Almost as soon as I went outside, I saw one of these upright standing canines openly showing itself about 300 or 400 feet distance from me. It was standing next to a tree at first, then it returned my stare, and slowly, casually, took a step behind that tree to be out of my view again. Imagine seeing that right away at the beginning of your outdoor patrol. I should have gone back inside immediately, and in retrospect, I'm still amazed that I didn't. I must not have been taking the threat of the Dogman as seriously as I should have been. I think they had the advantage over me, because I really had never believed in monsters before. I should have already seen more than enough to know the danger we were all in, but I was still in denial, still thinking that I was home in Pittsburgh, and that werewolves couldn't possibly be real or hungry. Walking around the house one time, I saw that dark one who ducked back behind the tree. Then I saw a much lighter one, as it trotted from behind one tree to behind another. I wondered how many of them were out there, when I either saw that first Dogman again, or else another of a similar build and similarly dark gray fur. All of these Dogmen seemed to be the same basic type, and that made it harder to tell how many of them might be out there in the darkness. By the time I had gone 3/4 of the way around the house, I was feeling a kind of frightened that I had never before knew existed. I prayed that the way would be clear for me to run around that last corner and head back inside the house. If I turned that corner and saw one of the Dogmen waiting for me, well, as I said, I was feeling a new kind of frightened. When I did round that corner, and I did find the coast clear, I ran back inside like I knew my life might depend on my speed. When I got back inside there, I felt like passing out. I mean, I literally felt like dropping to the floor in a faint. Somebody needed my answer to a question, though, so I went on autopilot and managed to keep performing my duties while I very nearly went out of body for a little while there. Needless to say, the rest of my patrolling was done from the inside, peeking out the shaded windows, while the guests cheered and jeered over the sports ball on TV. If I felt as panicked as I did, better to keep the others from realizing how bad the situation really was. I walked around, sneaking peeks out of windows, and actually seeing the beasts out there about every 3rd or 4th time I looked. There were at least 3 of them out there, and 33 of us inside, including me and my 2 assistants. But there might have been 10 of them out there, or 20 or more. It was impossible to tell how many might be hiding out in those snowy woods. As the football game and TV show finished and people made their final restroom trips, we started getting ready to bring people home in an almost military-style fashion. I had written names and bus assignments down on index cards, and we got the 30 guests split into our 3 vans, each with their own route, to deliver our friends, associates, and customers back to their homes. We had gone out front in a large, loud group, and during the noisy procedure of assigning people to buses, I never caught one single sight of any Dogman. I felt as though the problem was over. Maybe the creatures were off stealing dog food from one of the neighbors, I thought, and I drove off into the night, carrying my jolly revelers home one by one out in the suburbs. My original plan was then to drive myself home to Pittsburgh, get a good night's sleep, then assess the damages over the next few days, most likely hiring a man or two to help me return the property to ship shape for the landlord. The thing was, the further I got away from those Dogman-infested woods, the less frightened and weirded out I felt, until finally, I just decided to drive back to the cabin that night. Maybe there wasn't too much to clean up. Maybe I could get a head start on it in the morning, and maybe I wouldn't have to hire any help at all, save a little money. The idea of sleeping out in the quiet country for a night was also a major deciding factor. I really had pushed the Dogman incidents out of my head already. Since I had remained sober through all the partying, I really have no explanation for this lapse in judgment on my part. It was nearly dawn by the time I was driving the van back into the neighborhood of the cabin. It sure looked creepy in the dark night, and I knew I should have slept back in the city. In order to get the final way to the cabin, you have to pull off the main street onto a gravel road that even in winter seems to be perpetually under tree cover. It looks like night sometimes in there during the day, and at night it could feel almost as though you're driving through an underground tunnel. I hadn't actually driven there this late at night before, and it almost felt as though I were driving down a long esophagus toward my own doom. Before I knew what was happening, I saw the silhouette of Batman leap out in front of my headlights. The sudden illumination revealed a hairy, or really furry, dark gray humanoid animal figure with a horrific scare mask of a head on it that probably more closely resembled a wolf head than anything else. I heard a sound on my trunk as the rear of my car dipped down. I saw a wisp of white with a very light gray tail flit up onto the roof of the car as something heavy yet limber bounced around up there. There were 2 of them, 2 of these Dogmen, both blocking my passage. I really most wanted to go home, no matter how long the trip back to Pittsburgh was. So I went into this sort of zen state, where I just asked myself questions in my head like, how would I get out of this situation most efficiently if I acted super calm in this moment? And really dumb nerdy questions like that. I had first wanted to do a U-turn, but as I started the first part of that maneuver, I saw that the path was not going to be wide enough for it. I resolved to slowly and carefully drive in reverse until I was back to the paved road. And as I turned around to look out the back window of the car and extricate myself from this situation, I felt the darker Dogman in front of the car take a running leap onto the hood. I knew what was happening. I didn't even turn to look. I knew that the less I directly observed the Dogman, the better I could focus on escape. The more I looked at them, or thought about them, the more stressed I would make myself. I could hear the 2 creatures engaging in some sort of rough play above me. That was fine with me, because it meant the back window was clear, and I could see where I was driving to. Once the 2 battling wolf things rolled off my car the back way, I was locked in place all over again. At the time, it felt to me that those 2 Dogmen wanted to tear each other's throats out. It also felt that they were battling over who got to have me for dessert. Looking back on it, I find myself wondering if the entire thing might have been even more frightening a situation than that. What if they were just playing with each other? What if this life-threatening situation I found myself in was just a game to those Dogmen? What if these creatures who seemed to me more savage than any monsters from the nastiest nightmare were only playing around when I saw them. What if I never even saw them get mad? I remember slowly backing into the Dogman as they fought, trying to nudge them, either further down the pathway or off the gravel road entirely. It was slow progress, but it was progress until suddenly somehow the creatures remembered. They disliked me more than they disliked each other. Or maybe they remembered I was the one with the ribs or something, because the last third of my way driving backward out of that gravel road featured the two Dogmen going berserk over my roof, trying to tear it up, trying to get their formidable nails or claws between the door and the glass windows to pry them open, trying to get into the car at me, by whatever means necessary. I backed right out onto the main road there, with two large feral canines furiously trying to gain entry to the interior and blocking my view in the process. I heard another car beeping wildly, no doubt someone I was about to drive into backward. I can't imagine what he or she thought they were seeing driving backward into them. Their loud, sudden beeping caused the wolf creatures to jump loudly off my car and disappear even more loudly into the surrounding underbrush. I took the opportunity to start driving at the maximum allowed speed limit, away from there. I was in such a disoriented state that I don't think I realized what direction I was driving in until I passed 3 exit signs already. I just drove back to Pittsburgh. With all its drawbacks, Pittsburgh has one great advantage over the country. Nobody in Pittsburgh has ever had to complain that Dogman ate my catered ribs. Our executive producer is Timothy Ferguson. If you don't like him, then you must be a jerkison, because we are all just fine with him, our executive producer by the name of Tim. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, Timothy Ferguson, for making this episode possible. In exchange, Timothy gets to see our secret uncensored Dogman stories far too wild to ever tell on this channel. And you can see them too. All you gotta do is join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or else click that join link under this or any of our videos to become a channel member. Now here's TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman to fill you in on the rest of the deets. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com. And that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
back for more scary stories.